Dr. Lieberman, the latest Epstein document dump has cast former Duchess of York Sarah Ferguson and her ex-husband Andrew Mountbatten Windsor as grubby and
It was not the headlines about Epstein that finally broke the silence inside palace walls. It was the staff, the cooks, the maids, the aides who had spent years keeping everything running smoothly, and when their frustration reached a point where it could no longer be contained, it did not stay behind closed doors. It went all the way to the Queen herself. Not a quiet word, not a subtle correction, a direct intervention from the monarch because the household, quite simply, could not cope. That is the detail that changes everything. In recent weeks, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and Sarah Ferguson have once again found themselves pulled back into public scrutiny, following the latest release of Epstein-related documents. Their names appearing in email exchanges has reignited controversy. But behind the legal headlines and public debate lies a different story. One about how they treated the people tasked with serving them, and how that treatment slowly eroded patience inside the royal household.
Who knew of Epstein's vile activities, yet continued to grow their relationship with him. So much of the communication that we've read is after he was convicted on some really serious and ugly charges.
Former royal employees are not known for speaking out. Discretion is the currency of palace life. When they do speak, it is rarely casual. Over the years, a steady stream of former staff, courtiers, and royal observers have described Andrew and Sarah as extraordinarily demanding behind closed doors. Not in constant, explosive outbursts, but in a grinding, relentless way that left staff exhausted and morale dangerously low. One of the most detailed accounts comes from former royal butler Paul Burrell, who has spoken about the early years of Andrew and Sarah's marriage. According to Burrell, the problems began long before the public collapse of their relationship. He describes a household that did not operate within the structured rhythms of royal life. Royal kitchens are systems of precision. Meals are planned in advance. Waste is minimized. Staff schedules are predictable. Efficiency is part of the culture. Under Andrew and Sarah, Burrell suggests, that discipline fractured. They reportedly stayed in bed for extended periods while still expecting full service. Breakfast times shifted unpredictably into lunch. Lunch drifted into afternoon tea. Dinner could become a late-night request, and every change created ripple effects.
Epstein was a very mysterious man who obviously did a lot of bad things, but he had this magic, this ability to attract people who were very rich, people who were in high places, royalty, and how he kept them friends to be friends of his is by sort of keeping them in, having something on them.
This was not simply about indulgence. It disrupted the entire machinery of the household. Maids were reportedly unable to access bedrooms to perform basic duties. Kitchens functioned more like on-demand restaurants than structured royal residences. Chefs accustomed to preparing meals for Queen Elizabeth II, who was known for her disciplined routines and dislike of excess, were suddenly scrambling to accommodate erratic requests. According to Burrell, the waste alone angered senior staff. The Queen valued moderation and planning. To see resources used carelessly was not just inefficient, it was out of step with the institution's ethos. Eventually, complaints escalated. They reached the master of the household, and from there, they reached the Queen. Her intervention, by Burrell's account, was firm but measured. The message was straightforward. If the sovereign herself could adhere to routine and respect staff systems, then her son and daughter-in-law could do the same. The fact that such intervention was required speaks volumes. The Queen rarely involved herself in household disputes unless absolutely necessary. What stands out is that the pattern did not fade with time. Royal biographer Andrew Lownie has documented Andrew's relationships with staff across decades and residences. The theme that emerges repeatedly is expectation without reciprocity. Absolute loyalty was demanded. Instant compliance was expected. Yet stability and appreciation were not always returned. Former staff have described Andrew as moody and unpredictable, not constantly hostile, but prone to sharp irritation when instructions were not executed exactly as envisioned.
Royal staff are refusing to work for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor following his move to Sandringham. There are new allegations about the sordid and degrading acts the King's brother and his billionaire criminal friend wanted to carry out.
According to accounts cited by biographers, vague instructions could be followed by sudden frustration when results failed to meet his unspoken expectations. There are also reports of staff being frozen out after falling from favor. Once someone was perceived as insufficiently loyal or attentive, their position became precarious. Some were reassigned quietly, others departed altogether. Over time, Andrew's inner circle reportedly narrowed, reducing both trust and institutional support. Sarah Ferguson's dynamic with staff followed a slightly different pattern. She was often described as warm, informal, and approachable initially, but that warmth, former aides suggest, could shift quickly. Plans would change at the last minute. Social events would expand unexpectedly. Staff would be required to adjust without notice. Entertaining was a recurring point of tension. Late-night gatherings, extended hospitality, rooms reset multiple times, meals prepared long after shifts should have ended. It was not the entertaining itself that created resentment. Royal households are accustomed to hosting. It was the absence of structure. Everything revolved around mood and impulse. After Andrew and Sarah separated and later divorced, some observers expected a reduction in tension. Instead, several accounts suggest the atmosphere became more strained. As Andrew's public role diminished, his reported sense of grievance deepened. Budget constraints, staffing reductions, and security changes were met with frustration.
Former Duke's denials failing to stop his expedited eviction from Royal Lodge. Staff at his temporary Sandringham home told they can refuse to work for Andrew if they feel uncomfortable.
Rather than adjusting expectations to new realities, he was described as resisting them. Morale, according to some former staff, fell further. Employees worried about triggering irritation or being blamed for institutional decisions beyond their control. Retention became more difficult. Working within the household reportedly required emotional resilience, with little assurance of long-term stability. This pattern carried into the years following Andrew's withdrawal from public duties. Reports suggest that securing staff willing to work under him became increasingly challenging. Some aides described him as isolated, focused on perceived slights and past status. Isolation, in turn, can amplify tension. With fewer voices around him, frustrations reportedly intensified. Meanwhile, Sarah Ferguson continued to move in and out of Andrew's orbit. Publicly, they maintained an image of amicable coexistence. Privately, staff reportedly found the dynamic confusing. Alignment one day, distance the next. Emotional undercurrents shifting without warning. What stands out across these accounts is consistency. Different individuals, different decades, different residences, yet similar themes. Unpredictability, entitlement, a lack of structured consideration for those responsible for maintaining daily operations. None of this constitutes criminal wrongdoing. It does, however, paint a picture of a workplace environment many found deeply challenging. Royal households operate on discipline, discretion, and mutual respect. When that balance fractures, the system strains. The Queen's early intervention now appears symbolic of a larger pattern. It marked a moment when internal friction became impossible to ignore. Years later, that friction may help explain the shrinking circle around Andrew today. His recent departure from Royal Lodge under cover of darkness marked a dramatic shift. The 30-room mansion in Windsor Great Park had been his home for over 2 decades. Reports indicate the move occurred late at night discreetly, as renewed scrutiny mounted following fresh document releases.
I think he was on the spectrum, the autism spectrum. He had this strange preoccupation with stuffed animals on his bed, and they had to be in these specific kinds of, and other kinds of dolls, and they had to be in specific kinds of places.
Andrew is now residing at Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate, a far more modest property once occupied by Prince Philip. Eventually, he is expected to move to Marsh Farm, described in the press as a simple 5-bedroom farmhouse. Renovations continue. The contrast with Royal Lodge could not be sharper. Even in his new surroundings, reports suggest that some estate staff have declined to work for him, citing discomfort with his public status following controversy. Senior royals have emphasized that Andrew is now a private citizen without formal royal duties or protection. The world has grown smaller, fewer staff, fewer allies, fewer buffers between behavior and consequence. Royal households are built on silence. Exact details of every interaction will never be fully public. But when accounts across decades echo similar themes, coincidence becomes harder to argue. So the question lingers: Did Andrew and Sarah ever fully grasp the cumulative impact of their behavior on the people around them? Or were staff seen as permanent fixtures, present, replaceable, expected to absorb whatever pressure flowed downward? As Andrew's physical world contracts from palace grandeur to rural seclusion, the institutional patience that once absorbed tension appears to have thinned. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe this was simply personality conflict inside a demanding environment, or does it reveal something deeper about entitlement and accountability within the royal system? And if you want to stay informed on the latest royal developments, make sure to subscribe.